Half a day, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. The Committee on Education, Air Transportation and Statistics, Research and Planning will now convene this joint roundtable hearing. Today is February 8, 2019, and it is now 3:35 in the afternoon. For the record and in accordance with the Open Government Law, public notices were sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and all main media broadcasting outlets on February 1st, 2019, and the second notice on February 5th, 2019. With me today is my subcommittee co-chair, Senator Amanda Shelton, also Senator Pito Terlahi, who's the Public Safety Chair. We have Speaker Tina Barnes, thank you, Speaker, Senator Clint Rogel, and Senator Kelly Marsh Teichno. Thank you, Senators, for being here. The joint roundtable that we are hosting concerns safe schools, which are fundamental to our students' successes and achievements. School safety should be addressed through a comprehensive approach that focuses on prevention, intervention, and response planning. The purpose of this roundtable is to develop a sense of understanding and partnership between the Department of Education, the various schools, and the community to ensure that systems and programs that create a safe learning environment are in place. I recently visited all the high schools and had the opportunity to speak with some of our administrators at the schools. To our school communities, we thank you for being here and thank you for having us. We have a responsibility to provide an adequate education to every child on this island, and we are trying to do that. We have with us today, I'd like to just invite the members that are here today present to go ahead and introduce themselves.
Ian Smello, IBOG's representatives from Southern High School.
Nathan Apathy, IBOG representative from Southern High School.
James Luan, Guam Education Board.
Maria Gutierrez, Vice Chair of the Guam Education Board.
John Fernandez, Superintendent, Guam Department of Education.
Captain Scott Wade, Guam Police Department, Auxiliary Services Division.
Mark Mendila, Chairman of the Guam Education Board.
Ron McNinch, Guam Education Board, and I have about 25 policy students with us today also.
GPD Major Fred Chartliff, the Investigations Bureau Chief.
Major Man Chung, Bureau Chief of the Operations Bureau, Guam Police.
Sergeant Paul Tapal, the Guam Police Department, Auxiliary Service Division, PIO.
Good afternoon, Chris Anderson, Guam Department of Education.
Buenas, Senator. David Efeisen, Youth Correctional Facility and Department of Youth Affairs.
Thank you. I also note that we do have some oral testimony. Just a little bit of the rules of engagement of the roundtable hearing. There are some concerns that we do have. We'll speak of perhaps past incidences and how they were managed. I would like to open the floor to my colleagues first. I think you've prepared a statement. And then we also have a presentation, right? A community outreach policing presentation? Okay, so we'll do that. But and then once all of that is done, we will invite everyone that would like to give oral testimony or express their concerns to please come forward and feel free to do so. I want to remind everyone that this is a public forum, and so if you feel the need to come up, please do not hesitate. The more information we get, the more perspectives that we see will help all of us here at this table to move forward in a progressive and positive manner. So thank you, everyone. Mr. Superintendent?
With the permission of the committees, may I defer to our board chair first and then follow?
Thank you, Honorable Senator Telena Nelson, members of the Education Committee, Sizu Asmasti, Senator Pito. I'm actually inspired today because this is the second time that we were able to come and talk about safety and security in our schools. Earlier today, I had an opportunity to be with the superintendent at Simon Sanchez High School, when the lieutenant governor, along with the governor, laid out their plan in terms of how they're going to help assist the Department of Education in addressing some safety issues and concerns. A couple months ago, it was just a superintendent at the table when we were talking about safety. So I'm very grateful that the committee was able to assemble our partners, because truly, without partnership from the community, it'll be very difficult and challenging just for the department to address the safety issues and concerns. And what's really, really inspiring is that now we're engaging with our students and we're allowing them and affording them the opportunity to assist us in the crafting of policy at the Department of Education. So, you know, they're the end product users of what we provide, which is education. And of course, the best way to kind of get them involved in it so that there's impactful conversation as to how we deal with safety issues and as a community, it's very important. And when partnerships like this and everybody is around the table and we're free to talk about, you know, the challenges before us, but also the successes. I know sometimes it's not all roses out there. There's a lot of issues. But when the Department of Education receives students in the morning as they come into school, whether through also our employees, there's issues that sometimes come along with that. And so we realize that, you know, in terms of what's going on in the community, and eventually it sometimes festers and it shows itself at the schools. And so I think when we have the police department, the students, the mayor's council, DYA, and everybody around the table, and we put the pieces of the puzzle together, I think that's the best way to craft policy that will encompass. And things are changing rapidly. You know, mental health is right now one of the biggest things that we're talking about nationally when it comes to safety. And so this conversation, I know from this morning's conversation too, when the students were leading the discussion, it's very inspiring. I'm just glad that people are around the table. I know there's going to be great presentations. There's a lot of successes that we're going to talk about, but there's also going to be some challenges. So our hope from the board's perspective is that whatever comes of this, if we can align our policies also to make those changes within the department, if there's any gaps, we're willing to do that. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our superintendent to present on behalf of the board. And then, of course, we're here to answer any questions that may come up. Thank you.
Alpha Day and good afternoon. Let me just recognize, I did put together a testimony, and I believe all of you have a copy. And as you can see, as we tried to put the testimony together, I think the first page represents the opportunity that we have here today to talk about a collaborative approach to school safety, because there are actually 4 committees here present. I know that we met earlier at the call of Senator Pito Terlahi, and the speaker joined us and the staff of Senator Nelson to have a first conversation about school safety. And I think that was a very good opportunity to kind of start with that conversation about what things we had in place, what GPD was doing. And I think out of that conversation was really a request to, at least for the, you know, before we start responding to incidents, that we at least have an opportunity to share the types of work that is ongoing. Because sometimes we get incidents where people call us and say, well, did you call the police? Well, they know we call them all the time because we have that relationship, we have that protocol, and so forth. So we're glad to be here today along with our partners, GPD. I understand DYA is here, all of our administrators, our students as well on our board, and then all of you here as we're representing your 4 different committees. So I want to thank you for the attention you're giving to this matter. I do want to just, if you don't mind, take a moment to express appreciation to the governor and the lieutenant governor for coming out to Simon Sanchez High School today to announce, which I think is in line with the same discussion we're having here at this legislature, the creation of a governor's school safety partnership. This group, co-chaired by the lieutenant governor and myself as superintendent, will be comprised of representatives from the Guam Police Department, Behavioral Health and Wellness, Guam Homeland Security, and our focus will be on 3 areas: increasing law enforcement presence on campus or near school campuses, improving access to behavioral health services, and hardening school facilities. Our goal and mission is to work collaboratively to find ways to improve in these 3 areas, and our task is to provide findings and recommendations no later than June 30th, 2019. But in speaking to the Lieutenant Governor, we certainly hope to have some recommendations in advance of that so we can start to mobilize the necessary attention, resources, supports that might come along with those recommendations. So I do want to thank them for making that partnership a priority. And I know that although this is the initial composition, in our early conversations, we know that there may be opportunity and a need for legislative work and help. And so we do certainly envision that this will be an opportunity where we will reach out to those who will be instrumental in addressing those issues to be a part of that work. But at the very least, with the identified leads from the agencies, and we're talking about Chief Ignacio, we're talking about Therese Areola, as well as Tim Uggan taking the leads. We will have our point people engage with them. Our next step is to really set that first meeting, and actually the schedule of meetings that we hope to keep a battle rhythm going on with regard to keeping momentum behind this effort. And I think even though we already work in partnership, I think the governor's attention to this will just accelerate that work and expedite those recommendations. So really appreciate that. I want to reiterate a statement before I go on that I made in a similar roundtable in October, and actually probably several times as we've had roundtables on these matters. The difference on this roundtable, if I could just suggest, is that typically we have these roundtables right after an incident's happened because it's a response to something in the media, some videos or this and that. I do appreciate that, that at this point where it seems like we're being a little bit more ahead of the game to try to be a little bit more proactive, have this discussion, and I'm sure it'll be an ongoing set of discussions. But I do want to just say for the record again that the mission of the Department of Education is to educate our kids and get them ready for opportunities to go to college and to start careers. We don't teach or condone bullying, use of drugs and alcohol, use of weapons, or fighting and harming others. These issues affect our schools. We see them in our schools. We know they come also from our communities. And so it is going to take DOE, but not just DOE. It's going to take our mayors, our parents, our agency partners like we have around this table, the Attorney General and others to just help address these community issues and help steer these kids towards a positive path in life. And of course, your help as elected officials to support those efforts so that we can help these kids, help our kids succeed. There's no way that any single agency can fix these ills and these troubles that manifest themselves in the kinds of behavior or threats that you end up seeing on videos or in the media. Even as DOE does its best, and I believe we've done a lot, ranging from our school-based behavioral health services program, which was recognized as a top program in the last Government of Guam Macro Awards, are implementing substance abuse interventions, championing anti-bullying and anti-drug campaigns with our law enforcement partners, creating opportunities for credit recovery for disconnected and failing students as examples. We just can't do this alone. The front lines are critical at the school level. Employees, in many cases, students as well, are trained to be prepared to respond to a wide range of risks and hazards. And as you know, this can be simply from power and water outages that we encounter at any day of the week, to foodborne illnesses, tsunamis, and bomb threats. It's just important to note that during the most intense and severe conditions that we go through on this island, it's our administrators and it's our staff that we depend upon to manage shelters, not for our students, but for our vulnerable families and our vulnerable residents. Just this past example of the typhoon Mangkhut that hit us, we actually ended up sheltering 2,500 individuals, and 40% of these individuals were children. And so through that effort, we actually supported Mayor Savaras in her Tier 2 sheltering, where we had 200 residents and 90 children at that shelter, supported through our outreach staff, our food services, our partnership with DPW bus operations to help take care of the kids and help support the efforts around our families. Last month, we were the lead agency for the Guam Housing Coalition's point-in-time count, and we were out there from the superintendent to the deputies to our administrators to our outreach staff and our school resource officers to check on our homeless population and to reflect on and address the needs of our homeless students. So I believe we do what we can to leverage our strength and our capacity, not just to protect our students, but to assist the community at large. So as we deal with the issues that we're well aware of, I do want to say that unfortunately in today's evolving threat environment, we must also prepare for worst scenario that anyone can imagine, and that happens to be, at this point in time, the scenario of an active shooter on campus. Sometimes we like to think that we're immune from this threat, that we're so far away from the places that have to deal with these or that have been devastated by these events that maybe we won't be affected. But in reality, we have to be vigilant in ensuring that we are prepared to respond. So we are thankful for the partnership with our law enforcement agencies that have helped us with the training of our employees and our students to respond to even that unimaginable scenario of an active shooter on campus. When it comes to school safety, our department is focused on prevention as well as effective response. And I think Vice Speaker Nelson talked about that as a range of whether it's supports, whether it's mental health, whether it's other protective measures. There's a lot of things that we try to do to prevent these things from happening and then to address them, be prepared to address them. On the prevention side, I think as you've heard before, DOE relies on has implemented the positive behavior interventions and supports framework and relies on our student conduct manual to promote positive student behavior through evidence-based practices. We have an SOP that we've documented in here that requires schools to establish expected behaviors, teach these behaviors to students, and to model correct behavior. And it's another aspect of the framework is our systematic method of addressing behavior violations, so we have consistency in how we address students. I mentioned the school-based behavioral health program. Over the past 2 years, under the leadership of Chris Anderson and Nadine Cepeda as our district psychologist who first came to me with this idea, we've expanded our ability to provide greater mental health supports to students at the district level through the School-Based Behavioral Health Initiative. This is a program that provides therapy to at-risk students identified at most in need of services. Now, we have 4 district psychologists, but of course we have about roughly 29,000 students who may be in need of these services. Due to the large number, we've also established a program for our school counselors who are seeking to attain licensure as a licensed professional counselor to work under our 4 psychologists. So this practice allows DOE to add 4 more practitioners to our clinical team. The school-based behavioral health program provides the following services: clinical intake assessment, individual counseling, group counseling, where in parentheses you'll see there substance abuse intervention, family counseling, case management, consultations, crisis debriefings, and trainings. We also have at the school level the child study teams which are provided to target school level interventions for those students who experience academic behavior, socio-emotional challenges, and they really are designed to provide teachers with supports and strategies to help students in academics, behavior, and health. Family outreach, we have a student-parent community engagement project, and it's also a facet of our Head Start program that we provide assistance to at-risk students and their families by collaborating with our schools and our partner agencies. And also, these are the teams that go out to the homes and see what the situations are with the families at home and determine whether we connect them to services and supports. So we do that on a regular basis. We also partner with other agencies. So I was very happy to see the partnership that we have with GPD on, we've done in the recent past the basketball tournaments and the kickball tournaments that we've done to support our students. Just following in that example, just recently, as recent as a week ago, 6 of our elementary schools started their own kickball tournament to try to get their young kids and their families engaged. And as you know, Speaker, this is part of the health and wellness part, but it's also part of engaging, ensuring that these kids have positive activities and that their families can be there to support them. So I was out there last week, and it was very good to see the kids, but most of all the parents who came out to see the play. And right now, I believe for a few Saturdays they'll be out at the fields in Totu, where we have about 6 teams, and they run about an hour each. So if you ever have a chance, we'd be glad to see you there. So student outreach, as you notice, we have 2 students down here. We call them IPOGs. They stand for Island-Wide Board of Governing Students, who are by law members of our Guam Education Board. And so they come to the board meetings, but also hold their separate meetings. And they annually lead student exchanges and student conferences focused on positive themes and community engagement. This year, our IBOGs, in collaboration with the Guam Police Department and the Micronesian Resource Center, are planning a youth symposium aimed at encouraging students to lead and make positive impacts in the community. The superintendent, myself, also, we started to have regular meetings with what we think is also another critical group. These are leaders from Micronesian student associations who are starting their own organizations to try to reach out to their peers as well to promote positive student leadership. They're not as established and well practiced as our IBOGs, but I think it's important that we look at those voices. I was very glad to have Senator Clint Ridgell come out to talk to the group of students and just to kind of share his priorities. So very nice to have him there. Schools also on their own take the lead to promote positive behavior, such as Tamuning Elementary School's Peace Week that they recently held, and then upcoming Benavente Middle School does its annual Peace March, where the students, with their signs, they'll go to Maria Joa and Wedding Yell, and it's an opportunity for them to reach out to the elementary school students, and just a goodwill annual event where they promote peace and positive behavior. So that's next month. Again, you're welcome to join. That's nice, as long as you just put on good shoes, and if it rains, bring an umbrella. But rain or shine, we were out there. I think it was raining, Mrs. Gutierrez. It was raining, but the kids were out there, so we were out there as well. But it happens, and I'm happy to share that next date with you. School resource officers, I believe the last time we met on the same issue, there was a discussion about where we were headed, and it's still a discussion about where we're headed, because right now we are currently working through our federal grants with the judiciary, who over the past several years, ever since I've been here, have been supporting the school resource officers, and they provide about 6 Category 1 officers in our DOE high schools. They are law enforcement centered, and they work in pairs. So when we say 6 SROs, it used to be 10, but the resources have not been able to expand those resources. The 6 actually then, as they work in 2, will cover 3 schools at a time. So it's really a rotation through our high schools. And they are trained to use firearms, but they do not, I want to emphasize that, do not carry firearms on school campuses. At this time, following the governor's recommendation, we are looking at the options for moving the SRO functions into the executive branch. So I think we had a little bit of this discussion last time. What I think the Lieutenant Governor brings to this, because of his role at the courts and his oversight of the judiciary program, it actually has been a conversation we've had for about 4 years, talking about how we, where would this program go if it were to stay with the judiciary? And there are a number of issues, of course, that arise because they are probation officers, and they have a different role than the police would have from a law enforcement standpoint. So we've talked about the possible shift and how do we plan that. Now, we are restarting that conversation. What DOE has done through the leadership of the board is try to look at building internal capacity to support in-house SROs. So we have school attendance officers that, in reality, we had been utilizing them to support some of the school safety issues that, I think as time has evolved, their focus is on truancy and attendance, but then because of their training, we've said, can you please assist us with these safety issues? Can you report to the school? Be there, be a presence when we hear that a fight might break out, to assist the SROs from the judiciary. So we were very happy to be able to, through the proper process, get the board to approve creating SRO positions that would truly reflect what their responsibilities are, and then to work through the legislative. It went to the review of the legislature and DOA, so forth, to create those positions. So we recently opened that internally to see if we were able to make those conversions, and we now have 6 SROs and an SRO supervisor, and these SROs are currently Category 2 Special Deputy Marshals that meet the post-commission standards. Now, as part of the school safety partnership, the work now is to figure out where do we go from here. Is it to continue to build our employee base for SROs by adding more SRO positions, which will have its own costs and resources? The other conversation we're having is, is there a role for the police department? And does it need to be the SRO role, or can we talk a little bit more about the community beats, community patrols that go frequently by our schools, looking at the reserves and whether there's a way to work with the reserve program? and address issues of stipends and deployment and so forth to try to figure out what that right partnership is. So we've had preliminary conversations. I know that when we sat down in your office, Speaker, I know our GPD partners kind of expressed, their discussions, what they were discussing. I think at this point, one of the issues that came up was they did do some initial outreach to determine who might be interested, but the overall challenge I think the reserves have is just an issue about the stipends, whether they are sufficient to be able to provide a reasonable opportunity for those reserve officers who might work or have other ways to make a living. Can they also be compensated fairly? For us, we think it's an opportunity, and we're willing to kind of get to the table and see what works. So that's that issue. I know it came up last time, and it was hard to explain where we were going because we hadn't yet taken the steps, but it was build internal capacity, and we still are interested in what the police can add to it because they are law enforcement. I know Senator Terlahi, you talked a little bit about is there a role for firearms on campus? There's a national debate of should teachers be armed, should anyone armed officers be on campus. Right now, when our police officer reports to campus, they are armed. That's part of their job. It's not a controversy. They're trained. They should be armed. There's not a discussion about that. So we think that that issue might just be easily handled by figuring out a better, stronger partnership to have more police officers near, by doing a regular beat through their assigned schools or even on campus in response to any events that happen. Okay. So we're looking very closely at that, and I hope what we'll do is, that's one of the areas where I know the Lieutenant Governor has had experience. We know that the police, you've been talking to the police, so we're hoping that that's one of the areas that we can accelerate the plan and start to resource that appropriately. Visitor policies, another area. So we're very glad for the governor to come to Simon Sanchez, and the first thing she said was that she had to produce her identification at the gate. And I thanked her for her patience. I said, no, they know who you are. At the same time, they know that they have a responsibility to check IDs and get you to sign in. So I wanted to thank her and the Lieutenant Governor for going through that and recognizing that the responsibilities that the school have. Passport is good. And we'll move to real ID soon. So that we have protocols around visitors and access to campus. And then I want to talk about I mentioned some of the agency and community partnerships, but really, as you reflect here with the various committees, I do want to say there is a lot of work together. We all know that this is a shared responsibility. So we have GPD. I talked about the activities, the basketball, the kickball. Obviously, you've got Sergeant Tapao down there, who is Mr. School Crime Stoppers at least for when it comes to our students. They all know Sergeant Tapao for the work he's done in leading that School Crime Stoppers presentations. Cookie with a Cop, I know the police department's come in and had lunch with the kids. We encourage that. When they came to our schools in the beginning of the school year, when we were out there greeting students and families, I went to Tamuni Elementary, I saw 2 uniformed officers, and of course the first thing is to say, well, what happened? But luckily it was, it is an effort that the police put forward to just have I think it's called a high five initiative, where they're out there just to greet the kids, and so the kids get to see them in a different context than just responding to an incident or an emergency. They're not the only partners. Guam Customs and Quarantine has provided training for us regarding search and seizure. Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness has provided mental health first aid training to many of our staff. Judiciary has provided Category 2 officer training. And then we've, of course, the assistance from our various nonprofit organizations. We're also working with Homeland Security to do some work through their infrastructure visualization program to photograph, document DOE facilities so that the layouts of the buildings are available to our law enforcement partners when they come in and respond to an incident. And right now, that's currently being implemented at Simon Sanchez, FB Leon Guerrero, and Southern High School. We just realized that when officers respond, they're not going to automatically know the layout of the school. So this process will help us have a shared resource for ensuring the most effective response possible. And I also listed an example of other training. There's always training going on in the department, but there's just an example of what happens at the school level and at the central office. Active shooter, safe crisis management. The Special Education Division provides a host of training, including services to students with emotional disabilities. We have internet training, safety online, iSafe training, responsible use of technology. Again, we mentioned PBIS, first aid, seizure training, anger management, mental health first aid, search and seizure. So when it comes down to those kinds of questions, and student support, Chris Anderson is really well-versed, who's sitting in the types of trainings that we offer out there. And before we start the school year, we engage in that same safety training for employees who are, before they get to the start of the school year. Yeah, we did. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fernandez, thank you for that. And as we look at the continued training, I just wanted to ask something because I was able to work closely with your teachers and nurses. When we look at the first aid and CPR training and all that, and what the nurses or the schools have worked to collaborate training, they talked about missing out on the AED, the machine that's used, and there was talks about not having enough units around all the schools. Has that been rectified yet, or
no? No, it hasn't, but it's something that I think will. I think the issue is we do need to look at nursing supplies, and typically we fund them through Healthy Futures funds. I was in a nurse's office up at Simon Sanchez. This is one of our nurses who again won one of our life-saving awards at the last awards banquet. That basically what he did, and you might have seen this video of a student who punched the window at Simon Sanchez and was bleeding all over the place. And he was I believe he was slightly intoxicated, came into the nurse's office. Nurse had to calm him down, say, you're going to bleed to death, and then basically make sure that they addressed it. And I said to him, do you have what you need? And of course he said, well, we do what we can with what we have. Of course, as a nurse, you're going to take whatever you have, right? I mean, if it's a phone book, you're going to use the phone book. But that is an issue that we do need to keep an eye on. I know that we do get community donations as well to the nurses, which is very good. But it is, as we go through this, that's an area of engagement to make sure, school to school, that those critical supplies.
And making sure that those equipments and supplies are there, so a part of that laundry list to be included also.
One interesting thing, if I could just say it, I mean, it's a kind of an active shooter scenario issue. They did have a training, and I was invited. I believe someone from the naval base came over, a Navy doctor, and he had this presentation on Stop the Bleed, which is a national movement, and it basically says that when you have casualties for an active shooter situation, it's because people are bleeding out. That's the critical issue. So it's a strange conversation. You don't want to have that kind of training going on, but really we were saying we need to train the nurses to apply tourniquets. In the event that you have that kind of trauma, that's where you're going to lose your students or employees, and just those types of things. So he introduced the notion of having trauma kits and tourniquet kits, because there are commercial tourniquets that you can do. But we're at that stage of discussion where we're talking about how do you prevent someone from bleeding out on campus if such an event happens. But it makes sense, right? I mean, you got 5 minutes, 8 minutes to really address that individual, and if you don't, you could lose a life. So, but that's a question, that's a discussion we have to have, and we hopefully, we try not to envision that would happen in any of our schools, but better to be prepared than to be sorry for that. Okay. So the only other piece, real short, but this is on the response side. I think we've discussed this before. As part of the responding, when an incident happens on campus or a threat, we use a risk assessment matrix to address the situation and help guide us in our response. So this, we talk about the RAM. It's actually a common practice for us now. We talk about, hey, what does the RAM say? Use the RAM to determine your threat level and your response. But it actually came about, risk assessment matrix, it came about through the bomb threats. There was that year where there was bomb threats every other day. It was coming from off island. It was the phone calls. And we just questioned at some point in the first week, why do we keep running our kids out into the field? It doesn't make any sense. Is that the best response? Especially when we know this is, in the background, you're saying this got to be some kind of prank. So we asked that question internally. We looked and did some research as to how we do that risk assessment. We worked with the Marianas Regional Fusion Center, our law enforcement partners. We didn't say we're going to develop a matrix and just implement it. We said, I don't want to do anything until our law enforcement partners say that's good. We're okay with that because they're a critical partner. But we did that, and we've done that and utilized that to address issues like bomb threats and other threats on campus. Is it perfect? No. I mean, I think it's something that we have to keep looking at. It's something that, but it's a good practice and something that we can look to improve. But I appreciated the work that went into that for our schools because we were getting so much disruption. After we stopped responding in the same way, what happened after that was they went to the private sector, and everyone did the same thing that we had been doing. They were evacuating Kmart, the hotels, Micronesia Mall, and some of them actually reached out and said, "Can we borrow your matrix?" And we said, "Well, you do have to develop it so it's customized to your context, but it's the right kind of approach to being very rational and responsive." And then the emergency response plans. This is it's a short paragraph, but in essence, there is an emergency response plan for almost every type of incident, from earthquake to active shooter. Our administrators are well aware of it. Schools are required to develop the plans as it relates to their schools, know how to evacuate. They are required to do monthly drills. So you can dive in at that level, but every school has to have an emergency response plan. So the only other piece I would add to the response is that there are some next steps that we're already engaged in, and I hope that the school safety partnership that we started with through the leadership of the governor, we can address this issue, which is in December, the Federal Commission on School Safety issued their report, and it's a 180-page report, had 56 best practice safety recommendations. I believe it came out of the Parkland shooting incident, trying to see what else could be done to close the gaps with regard to school safety. And it looked at prevention, response as well, and a threat assessment and so forth. So we've actually completed a gap analysis, and our efforts right now are to try to tie that into the work we're going to do with our agency partners. I do believe, and I don't know that we have it today, but I do believe there are some policy discussions that are in there that might be either relevant to the board or the legislature. But I think what we were intending to do is just take those and bring that into the school safety partnership and then break it down into the specific actions that are necessary. And again, if there are policy or legislative issues that need to be considered, we want to bring that to your attention. And so that's in the process. And so again, just to close out, school violence, school safety, a community issue, and we just appreciate your attention and the willingness to collaborate with all of our partners to try to figure out how to protect our schools and make sure our kids are on the right track. So Sidus Ma'azi to all of you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. I'll now invite GPD to go ahead and give their testimony and presentation.
Hafaday, Guahusi, Scott Wade, Guam Police Department, thank you all for inviting us here. This is the second roundtable we've had in regards to education and safety this year. And first off, Chief Ignacio had a pre-scheduled prior engagement, so he couldn't be here. So he volunteered me to show up and see what we can do to work out this partnership that we've had going on with GDOE for a while. About a year or two ago, as the superintendent said, the Guam Police Department really started to get involved with working with GDOE. And it was all part of the community-oriented policing strategies that we had recently started to push forward to the front of the department. Traditionally, police work is reactional, and we looked at different strategies, investigative strategies, intelligence strategies, patrol-based strategies. And as a department, we moved forward with the community-oriented policing strategies. And what that is working with community partners to try to address their concerns and figure out ways with partnerships, communities, education, to solve their problems and see what we can do to make the island a lot better place. We've been doing a lot of outreaches with, and I will get to the PowerPoint in a minute, but we've been doing a lot of educational outreaches with GDOE. Traditionally, the Guam Police Department is asked to come in and do like career days, come in, meet the kids. Hi, I'm Officer so-and-so. This is my nice equipment. This is my dog. He can find drugs. And that's good, because that breaks down the barriers with the kids and the police. You know, it personalizes the police instead of making them the police officer who, we hate to say, most parents say, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to call the police, which is not really a good approach. It creates an image in the minors and the youth of police officers that's kind of negative. So instead of the traditional career day, we wanted to kind of change the things that we do at GDOE. So we started developing programs that were more education-based. So we would go into the schools, and instead of just doing a traditional career day, I'm Mr. Police Officer, we thought it would be better for the island, better for the school, and better for our department if we can try to talk to the kids at the early age and give them some education, strengths, and lessons to try to make them a better citizen. Because if they're a better citizen in school, they're a better citizen in the community. So that's been one of the biggest pushes that we've done with the Department of Education in our community-oriented policing strategies. Admittedly, there are a lot of challenges. The superintendent has repeatedly at roundtables brought up the challenges. GDOE has challenges, the department has challenges. We've been communicating and trying to work with them, the legislature and the governor's office, on trying to find creative ways to overcome some of those challenges and solve some of those problems. And some of them are short-term solutions, but I think the foundation, and more importantly, is if we examine long-term solutions. And so that's kind of why, from the Office of the Chief in my office, the Auxiliary Services Division, we thought that doing a proactive approach with the kids, with the education-based and the outreaches, was a way to kind of get ahead of the problem before it becomes a problem. And if we can just go to the PowerPoint real fast. So at the roundtable discussion that we had earlier this year, there was talks about GDOE and the Guam Police Department getting together for a town hall meeting, like an educational town hall meeting or like a roundtable with the community. The Guam Police Department, we've done a few of these, and it was connected to our neighborhood watch programs. So the mechanism or the conduit we used to hold town hall meetings in the past was to try to increase awareness and develop neighborhood watch programs within the villages. So I believe in the discussions we had in the last meeting that we're kind of trying to put together a GDOE and a Guam Police Department town hall meeting. And the PowerPoint that we have up here now is the basis of some of the discussions that we want to present during that town hall meeting. But as it involves GDOE, I thought it would be a good opportunity to share it here. And I won't bore everybody with the line per line PowerPoint presentation, but the first slide is basically the COPS strategy overall. The bottom line is we believe that the proactive approach is better than the reactive approach. Next slide, please. So in a nutshell, community-oriented policing services is the police department embedding ourselves within the community, GDOE and our partners, and trying to come up with the solutions to the problems. It's an organizational strategy that involves partnerships and problem-solving techniques. And next slide, please. So in the COPS strategy, there's kind of three pillars that we're really looking at and that we're focusing on as overall operations or strategies that we need to look at. The first is community partnerships, and those are neighborhood watch programs, Coffee with a Cop programs. The third pillar, and I'll get to the big one in a minute, the third pillar is a new one that we just started developing and we think is, and I'm glad to see Senator Clinton Joe here, which is the Federated FAS or Federated States Initiative. So without getting into that too much, because this is a GDOE roundtable, we think that we need to start working with that specific community and trying to identify some of the issues using the overall COP strategies that we're already using. But we're all here for youth and education, and that's the second pillar, which is our youth partnerships. And those are some of the programs that we have, and those are the education and youth sports initiatives that we're doing in the COPS initiatives. Next slide, please. So this slide is basically just an overview shot of what we've done in the schools specifically. If you look at the 2017 to 2018 year, we had 51 school presentations. Then when you get down to 2018 and 2019, there are 35 school presentations. If you just look at the numbers and you start to wonder, why did you do more that year than you did in that year? It's because we have changed, or we are changing our presentations. So in the past, when you had 51 school presentations, they could be career day or just show up kind of events. But as I explained earlier, we want to try to bring more education, more skills building, and more community-centric, better citizenship presentations to the schools. And they take longer. They take more time to plan, and they take more time to schedule with the school, which is why we had less on that year. You'll notice the Fade Away from Violence. There's three events that we've done, and Fade Away from Violence is one of our real big events that we do with community partners and with GDOE. And that involves not just sports, and we use the avenue of sports to try to connect with our partners, the community, the kids. We use the avenue of sports, but during these events, there's a lot of message sharing, lesson plan sharing, and character building. Next slide. So school presentations consist of, we have the DARE program, which, there's a few obstacles with the DARE program. But some of the new education programs that we're doing with GDOE are like the bullying, cyberbullying, stranger danger, and then anti-gang programs and drug awareness programs. Next slide. So the superintendent was talking about when he arrived at the school and there were 2 uniformed officers there. That's a new program that we kind of developed on the fly. It's High Five the 5-0. And basically all that is on the first day of school or when school starts again, just to get some officers down to the schools, just to say hi to the kids. We want to start them early in seeing us as not, if you're bad, the police are going to come, but we kind of want to break that barrier down, and that's all part of community-oriented policing strategies and developing that partnership with the community. Then we have the DARE program, and there are some obstacles with that, but it's still something we're developing, and there are ways to kind of change that program. I noticed that Senator Nelson has Bandania Teach mug, and that's kind of a DARE program that's Guam-centric. So we're looking at avenues and things like that that we can kind of develop and bring into the schools. Bullying and cyberbullying is one of the big presentations we're asked or requested a lot with the school, and it's just an example of the kind of education presentations that we want to bring into the schools now. Stranger danger, it's another popular one that we have with the mostly elementary kids, and it's about awareness. It's developing awareness, but at the same time we're developing awareness, we're breaking down those barriers between the kids and the police again. Anti-gang prevention presentations are pretty popular. The juvenile investigation section is part of the criminal investigation division, and in line with the community-oriented policing strategies, not just our office at Auxiliary Service Division and Community Affairs, the juvenile investigation sections are also putting together and developing programs that they can go in and do educational outreaches in the schools also, so that they're not just the follow-up enforcement investigative people or that the kids see all the time. We kind of want to develop them also into the whole strategy of community-oriented policing. Lunch with a Cop, that's a program that we've had for a couple years where the police officer goes and has lunch with the kids. And that's not pushing a message per se. There's no specific topic. We tried it a couple times where they had lunch with a cop with a specific topic. That worked good, but we learned that the kids really like it more when you just sit down with them and have lunch with them. Fade Away from Violence, that's a big events that we have, that we do with the school. As a matter of fact, the one that we have coming up this year is so we did the elementary kickball tournament last year. We had over 300 kids at the Harmon Sport Complex on a 2-day tournament to determine which elementary school was the best kickball team for elementary school on island. And it was, what school was that, Sarge? CL Titano. So CL Titano got the kickball tournament championship last year. We'll see who wins next time. But the one that's coming up, I think it's in June, is we're going to focus on middle school. So we kind of want to do the different school levels. We don't just want to keep it as the fun kickball. And the conduit we're using for this next Fade Away from Violence is a volleyball tournament. But instead of a tournament, we've decided we are going to work with GDOE to identify their Tier 1 students or students that might benefit best from this outreach program. And we're going to have them come in and have breakout sessions, development and education sessions, and work with the national volleyball team to do volleyball skills. So that's kind of our Fade Away from Violence thing. Like I said, there are a lot of challenges. You know, we've been working with the superintendent, Chris Anderson, a lot to try to develop some of the solutions to not only the education-based things that we can do with the kids, but also the presence, uniform presence, and responding. And those are things that still need to be developed, and there's challenges all around with that. But this is the second roundtable discussion we've had, and that's good synergy. It shows that we are all working together to, you know, try to find a solution, and hopefully we can get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Wade. I'd like to thank the superintendent for giving us a breakdown of all the proactive programs that we have, and I want to thank the Guam Police Department for their continued hard work and dedication to the community. And I also want to thank you for changing your approach, because you're absolutely right. The first thing in mind that we think when we think of law enforcement is that they're a reactive measure. So I want to thank you for making it more personable and less intimidating for our children and our students, because when we see police, we think that someone's in trouble, right? I'm not speaking from personal experience, I'm just saying. And so I want to thank you for, you know, being able to come down to the level of the students and to create a friendship with them, because this friendship instills a role model for them, so that instead of choosing a different lifestyle, that they maybe want to be a police officer one day. At this time, I want to hold my questions till the end, but I'd like to open it up to my colleagues, and I'll invite the subcommittee co-chair of education to go ahead and engage first. Thank you.
Hafa day, everyone. Thank you very much to DOE, GPD, DYA, the board, and especially our students, teachers, administrators, everyone for being here, and for Madam Chair for inviting us to have this roundtable today. I think it's very important that all of the stakeholders come together, and I'm really glad to see the willingness of everyone to work together to find solutions, but also to hear of the strategies and the programs that you have in place already to move us forward and for us to continue on that track. So I am very interested in the Student Support Services Division Student Conduct Report that was shared with the committee, and I wanted to ask about a particular school that I saw in Table 6 that, I don't know if it's in this copy, but it was shared in the online copy. Yeah, it's not in this copy presented today, but it shows the incident breakdown for each individual school. Okay. And I was concerned to look at FBLG and the incident rates there being very high, and I was just wondering, Superintendent or the board, if you can share a little bit why that is, and is it because of, is it the overpopulation, or?
So we do have, I'm going to say, before I said, he's up there, he's in the VIP lounge. We do have the administrator from FB Leon here as well. I mean, what you'll see in the disciplinary rates will be a reflection of both as you get into the older, the bigger schools as well, but also the approach to discipline as well from the administrator standpoint.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I mean, I'm happy to have the principal kind of talk about those challenges. He's shared that with us. But once you get to the middle and high school, you will see those rates go up. I'm not sure if it's an overpopulation. I do know they're very good at FB Leon Guerrero with trying to enforce discipline and make sure that kids understand the rules and consequences. They are challenged by the unique location that they're in. I mean, FB Leon Guerrero and Simon Sanchez, for instance, were really high in terms of they were at the targets of these incidents that have happened over the past couple of months with regard to vandalism. We've had repeated issues with outside the gate issues of students, not just students skipping and going out there, but also actually sleeping out there. I mean, they had an incident maybe a couple of years ago where they basically, with a partnership with the police, we went out there to kind of early morning to see what was happening in the area behind the fence. So they have their own unique circumstances. So that's part of the explanation. There are specific challenges for those specific schools. Just today we were looking again. I mean, one of the troubling areas is that back area, the perimeter, making sure that we try to find a way to limit access to the school. But as you can see, very brazen vandalism actions that took place over the past couple of months, or actually over the Christmas break. I mean, even involving a pickaxe being brought by, I think they end up, there are some minors that were apprehended that we just learned about as part of those incidents. They bring a pickaxe to come in and destroy things. So I'm happy to turn it over and ask Mr. Martinez if he'd like to share his experiences as principal of FB Leon Guerrero. I believe you're looking at probably an older report that you were able to get online. The monthly student conduct.
17,
Okay.
August 2017 to April
Okay.
2018 report. I don't know if this is the latest.
So. But I think here's what I'll say. It's probably consistent, if you go every month. So I'm happy for him to.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Martinez. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it was a number that jumped out at me.
It's okay. I'm used to it. First of all, I come from one of the biggest middle schools at this, of the district middle schools. I'm not seeing the table that you have, so I want to. I'm looking at this table 6 because I do not want to read off something that is probably different from what you have.
It's okay. Can you just explain some of the challenges in general that you do have at FB Leon Guerrero because of the increased population? Thank you.
If you're looking at the table, the way we also look at the discipline rate at the school, they're not all single offenses. These are repeated offenses done by the same students. So that is how you should look at also the data in regards to that. So the school does have a ODR that we follow, and it's a district ODR that we follow. And it comes from level 1, level 2, and level 3. So based on those levels of offenses that we have, we then institute and implement the discipline issues that we have there. Like the superintendent did say, we do have a very big population up there. Some of the challenges I had last school year were a lot of the break-ins in the school. We have an area in the back of the school that is jungled. There are students who were there, not only from our school, but from other the neighboring schools that house themselves there, and they would come in and break in. But like I said, in regards to the discipline rate that you're looking at, We just pretty much follow through with what we need to follow through in regards to the implementation of the discipline. And like I said, it is duplicate, repeat offenders. So that's why I just wanted to see the table that you have so I can look at it.
On the back side of that paper. Oh, the back side? Opposite side.
2.7, the 8.7, 9.5. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes, and then in November, the 24, December 23, January 16. Like
Okay, so if you look at the table does indicate that it is the calculate total number of discipline events divided by the number of school days in the month. So like I said, in the ODR that we have, these discipline rates, referrals that we have can range from a level 1 offense to a level 3 offense. Level 1 offense is not the most aggressive offense. The level 3 is the more aggressive offense. So this is a total compilation of all those offenses. So that's how I'm reading that.
Okay.
So it's not really all level 3 offenses. It can be level 2 offenses or level 1 offenses, ranging from a warning to a reprimand to lunch detention to work detail to in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension.
Okay, thank you. Again, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
That's
I know
okay, I'm fine.
we're talking a lot in generalities, but to see the specific numbers and if we can pinpoint some of the issue areas, I think it helps the committee a little more to understand where we can better support.
If you could ask, I mean, Mr. Anderson's over here, and what happens is that the conduct reports and the information is reviewed on a month-to-month basis and actually reviewed, and when there's an issue with the schools, they'll go back. So if you could just talk about the process for how this report is being used,
sure.
That might help that you understand how interventions are looked at and addressed.
All right. Senator, thank you to your staff for providing a copy of the table that you were making reference to. I really did need to see it so I could sort of zone in on your specific concern. I'll just refresh Mr. Martinez's memory because there was, if you look at November, December, those 2 months in which the average daily referrals per day per month were pretty high. Mr. Martinez, that was, if you recall, the issues with your uniform violations. And so we do have a protocol. These are adjudicated offenses for major, and Mr. Martinez was making reference to our levels of offense, and uniform violations is a level 1 offense. But when a student gets to 4 uniform violations, then it can be adjudicated and it could be logged into this report that you see in front of you, this table 6. But what we noticed is when we were calling the school and asking specifically why the referral rate was so high for those 2 months, we found out that those were uniform violations that were being keyed into Power School, but it wasn't for kids with 4 violations, it was students with a single uniform violation. So obviously they had to go back and correct those records, which they did. This obviously was a published report from last year, but the data has been corrected since then. So it isn't that high.
So we'll as a follow-up, we'll provide, if we do have a corrected, amended version. This is last year's, one of last year's reports, so we'll note if we can get you a corrected version.
Right.
But I think in general, what you're asking though, I mean, this is, as you look at the rates and you do see higher rates, they can be explained by different factors. So one of them is going to be the population, and of course the average daily discipline rate will reflect that the size of the school. But also, as you go and you know this, as you go through the school year, there may be issues that arise during the school year where the administration does want to take a little bit more of a stricter approach, just to reinforce policy or expectations. So sometimes you'll see schools that may be a little bit more flexible with uniform violations, and they figure out that there's too much of too many issues arising where they'll have to realign and say, look, you have to abide by these expectations, and we're going to refer you to the office. So it may see those kinds of fluctuations. But from the process standpoint, when the data gets reported, so the issue is we also have a system that we are able to report the data. Student Support Services gathers it together and reviews it. And if there are questions about what's happening at your school, they'll flag it and they'll have that conversation. So we're happy to respond to get you a more accurate rate. But I guess I was saying earlier that even as it gets corrected, FB Leongro does have its unique set of challenges, and you'll see their rate a little bit higher than others. But they, as a middle school, as a large middle school, Mr. Martinez deals with it every day. Can I say one other thing? Is that which is a unique situation. We were just there today. For those who are familiar with that campus as you are, there's that whole area, that jungle area back there. And we were just talking to Mayor Matanani and Lieutenant Governor. Is there any way we can get consistent support to keep that clear? Because otherwise it becomes a place where students may hide and skip. And like I mentioned, at one point, we noticed there was mattresses back there, and kids were sleeping back there. When we went and investigated that, we've not only did we find that, we also found this interesting thing where the kids have been missing for maybe a week from their homes and not reported to the police. So these are the kinds of issues that you have to deal with at the school level. And so the parents were not even aware, or had not reported it. Was raised some concern. So as long as that jungle keeps going back, it becomes an issue for Mr. Martinez to have to deal with. There was a series of break-ins earlier, not this year, but before. Part of that might have been, we saw the fence line. We were trying to keep the fence lines repaired. So when we had that issue, we saw fence lines, kind of damaged, people hanging out in the back. And when the break-ins were happening, we noticed they were stealing food, which is how we kind of figured out there's got to be someone back there at night. These recent break-ins, very troubling. They didn't steal anything of great value. I mean, for the most part, a lot of what we were seeing, because after the first break-in, everybody says, hey, if you have anything valuable, make sure you secure it, take it home. But they were coming in and just damaging the classrooms. And in fact, once we started locking and securing, they even came with a pickaxe and to get access to the doors. And then when they got in, destroyed things, and when we came in and said, did they take anything? There wasn't anything being taken. So every incident might be different in that way, and the police have to figure out how to take those circumstances to try to find the right perpetrators.
So I know you have a large school, Mr. Martinez. Do you know what the student-to-teacher ratio is?
The student ratio, based on our board contract, is 1 to 28.
Okay.
And then, depending on the special populations classes, we have 1 to 14 for our ESL and 1 to 12 for our SPED population. There are times, though, that our teachers are very great because we don't have enough teachers or rooms. They are willing to take up to 30 to 31 students.
Okay, yes. Thank you. Okay, then I also wanted to ask about the problem behavior. I know that we have here the the fourth behavioral problem on table 7, the second page. The fourth behavioral problem is the use or the possession of tobacco products. So I wanted to know if intoxication was also, I see that it's further down the list, but if intoxication also includes the possession of alcohol on campus, because it doesn't necessarily say alcohol, possession there.
Can I have Mr. Anderson? So there is a data dictionary that provides definitions to all of these. So, okay. But before I get any of that wrong, I want to just refer to him as an expert on that.
They are different, Senator.
Okay.
The possession of alcohol is a separate item that schools can use to hold students accountable.
Okay, but not lumped into the possession of tobacco.
No, they're very separate.
Okay.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is that schools can either charge the student with intoxication, if that was the case, or possession or use of alcohol. But they're separate offenses.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So while we're on the topic of school safety, I also wanted to open up the conversation again about alternative schools and maybe if we're perhaps seeing again a need for alternative schools. And if you can just, I don't know if you're able to share this data now or something that you can share with the committee, is how the incidents have changed within the schools since the alternative school has converted to the Success Academy. Yes, and if there is any feedback from the teachers and administrators, how they're coping with the change.
So I'll start by saying this. When we talk about alternative school, it seems like we always refer to, what the OJP Torres was. So as we talk about alternative schools, we're talking about a whole set of alternative settings for different and pathways to education. So I want to say that because we are working on alternative pathways, but I don't want to mix it up. So I think what you're talking about is the behavioral issues in JP Torres. So I don't believe that, as I've thought through this and tried to explain this to people, I don't think we have necessarily, I think this was kind of the evolution of what we were seeing at JP Torres. And I had this discussion with one of our administrators who actually worked there. And she said, it used to work for the kids. And I said, well, what happens when it works for the kids? What happens to them? Well, they go back to their schools. And I said, well, that's exactly the same issue that I was responding to when we start thinking about what is the point of the alternative school? How do we line it up with our mission to get kids to be on the right path? So I explained to them that when I went down, and I've gone down and visited with the students, they say, it's great here. Can we stay here? And I said, well, why do you want to stay here? It's like you're being punished. You're being removed from your school. And so the experience of the students, some of them say, look, it actually is very consistent. When JP Torres is successful in dealing with kids with behavioral issues, they don't necessarily want to go back. And so I said, so why don't we find a way to allow these students to finish? And that was the whole impetus for trying to figure out if this is working, why are we going to send these kids back to that bigger school, back to the friends that may have got them into trouble or the group that got them into trouble, to the same circumstances and challenges, because some kids just don't function as well. Just because it's a credit recovery doesn't mean that that it's no longer a school for behavior. The issue is a lot of times these things go hand in hand, right? You find someone who's failing and who's not, who's 2 years behind. They are typically manifested in a number of other issues. So even as we converted it as credit recovery schools, the referrals from the principals were kids who had disciplinary history. So I wouldn't say it would be we closed the school and we did something completely different. I said, I'm trying to hear what the kids are saying. They said, it works. Even if it works, why don't we just finish up? Because you send a kid back, the staff and the employees would talk about recidivism. They do things just to come back. So that was the whole structure. Right now, we've got about 150 graduates out of JP Torres Success Academy, which I think we probably would not have had. A smaller portion of that would have actually graduated their diploma. So in that way, it was success, I think, for kids who are challenged. And again, when you say kids are academically challenged, I would argue that you're probably going to find family and behavioral issues, right? So that's the point of that. So is there a need for an alternative school? Well, there is a need for a credit recovery school. Is there a need for a behavioral school? That's the issue. Was JP Torres helping to rehabilitate students to have better behavior? I don't think that was the case. That was the discussion that we had. We actually brought a set of administrators to go down to JP Torres and do an assessment of what was happening there, because and I sent our middle school and some high school administrators to go down there. I said, you refer the kids there. So are you satisfied that when they come back, they're ready to be reintegrated? And the issue was, no, because sometimes it just doesn't work. They go down there. It's easier to push them out to JP Torres. And then what I wanted to do was just say, can we just make sure that we finish, if they're going to finish up, it works for the high school students. The high schools, I think we can say that when the high school students there, if it's a better environment for them and they finish up, we've done a good job. The challenge right now is middle schools, all right? So we tried to work on a model that had been used before. I think we call it professional learning centers. It's similar to the opportunity rooms. That's one model. I think there's been some issues consistently staffing that model. So that's one thing, but I think that's one area. Some schools do a better job than others in implementing the PLCs, where those kids are separated, but they're not removed from campus. They're not put on a bus to go all the way down to Santa Rita to be punished. I ran into middle school students when I was there who got caught for drugs. They were caught for dealing marijuana. I said, hey, where'd you get the marijuana? Because how did you get involved in this? They said, oh, it's at home. So I said, okay, well, you got an issue. It's not going to get solved just by you being at this school. We had issues of people finding a knife and bringing it on their bag to school. They found it at the bus stop. These are middle school students, like 6th graders actually. And saying, well, so the question is that the right setting for the middle school students, or can we deal with them back at their home campus without removing them from their communities and pretty much, I think, setting them on a path to maybe not being able to reintegrate? As you know, middle school is a tough time for kids socially, emotionally, physically, and so forth. So the notion was, can we try to build capacity here? So we do end up with very hard cases with some of the middle school students. So when I talk about alternative learning now, it's in the context of, number one, can we expand what JP Torres is doing right now to serve more kids? I just had that conversation with our team. Can we expand Central and North? There's a lot of interest and demand for kids who probably are not succeeding in the mainstream school. Can we give them that alternative? Middle school is tough. What we're doing with the most serious cases, and I've reemphasized this to our middle schools, it's if they're committing crimes of violence, which is the most serious crime, use your expulsion authority. Now, here's the challenge. If you do use your expulsion authority, we're still committed to providing you an alternative environment, an alternative learning opportunity. So the thought was, and we've been working with DYA, they have 3 community centers. We said, okay, we're going to try to keep you on campus, but if you just can't do it, I mean, you're hurting others, you're hurting your teachers, and or whatever it is that's happening, and we have to draw the line, we're going to say, no, you can't be here. Now, do we want to go build you a school and remand a school that's going to be only for kids who are really violent? We have to think about that because we have to make it work. But the other option that DYA offers, can we partner and can they come and just be at the community centers in their communities and work that way? So that's one option that we are working on. We have an MOU with DYA to do so. I'll admit right up front that it's not structured in a way that I'm comfortable with. So I've been working with, I know Deputy Joe Sanchez, he couldn't be here today because I think his eyes are actually dilated. So he had a chance to be excused, but we're working on trying to find an alternative learning environment at the youth centers, these community centers, and thinking about building e-campuses where where you're basically talking about computer lab opportunities, providing a support from the department and working with DYA to supervise those kids, that small group of kids, to be able to do online learning as an alternative to being on campus if you're not functioning. So we've been experimenting with a pilot program, the platform we're using that has an online curriculum to help to try to see if that's an option for those kids. And I think the issue is, JP Torres is far, even for those who currently go there. It creates attendance issues and transportation issues, so we already need to think about the model there. But for the middle school students, that difficulty is, do we want to go ahead and keep them in with the older students in that model, or can we work on with DYA? Because I'm talking about the most serious offenders and the violent offenders that are still in that age group, but they just can't be on campus. Can we structure something where they're off campus, but still getting an education, maybe under the auspices of DYA?
Yeah. And Mr. Efeisen, do you know what the capacity is for the 3 resource centers?
And good afternoon, Senator. Just excuse me if I'm a little nervous. A big
Don't
group
be
here.
nervous.
DYA is one of the medium-sized department, but in regards to the sizes, if I may just step back a little, in regards to our overall approach, and I'm glad we're talking on levels of prevention down to intervention, over to post-vention, which is where we're always, and we're focused directly on the students that we all have mutually, whether it's with GPD, DOE, directed to us. A lot of the severe offenders we have that are held within youth correction facility and our max capacity within our correction, which you have visited, Senator, it's no more than 100. And that's significantly.
I'm asking specifically about okay.
I'll break down into our centers as we move out into the districts.
Okay.
So within that facility, we've already been working in actually directly with Mr. Anderson and the rest of the team with DOE to continue to build bridges along that line, Senator, to ensure the safety overall. And this is where we're starting to ensure that we're a big asset as a law enforcement, as joint force, to support everything that we see that is challenging our community overall within our current status in our society. But back to the districts, we have 3 districts. We have that we break down our resource centers. This is in Hadza. This is in Lagu in northern. Hadza is down in Ag, right across Mount Carmel. And Katan is our central in Manilo area. These 3 resource centers are actually focused directly for our clients who have severe offenses and have served time or have multiple offenses that have led to them being incarcerated with us. And in addition to their status also within the community, plus additional service providers outside of just DYA or DOE could potentially add also from Guam Behavioral Services and other issues overall. But if we're looking at capacity to compare with DOE, we're significantly a lot smaller in those resource centers in the house where we're probably less than 50 to 75 clients at any one time within a given day at those resource centers. And I'm just throwing out approximate numbers right now. I have our acting administrator who's not able to make it today. And on behalf of our management with our director, Ms. Brendan and Ms. Christina Uggan, I know they're extremely focused on ensuring that we continue to work together. But with regards to demographics, this is where we're strictly focused on reacting also not directly with the clients, not directly to their behavior, but we're trying to kind of grow outside the box and focus also on where those behaviors exist or how it's actually contagious within the environment, within their families, within their actual, and we're not going to go over anything regarding demographics overall, but this is where we're growing also working directly as a joint force. So with the size of the resource center, Senator, that's one thing we continue to offer, and that's one thing we can provide as an asset. But these are continually looking forward towards potentially not just allowing them to serve their time for the actual offenses that they've actually been found guilty of or the services they're needed, but how can we incorporate additional education services for them to continue to receive DOE services out in the forefront of with their village, of their district that we have. So that's where we stand, and if there's any way we can, this is our first start from our end to be part of this overall. So see how we can grow from there, but unless we look at growing and potentially escalating and increasing our resource center within each district, we currently have the 3 centers overall island-wide.
Yes, thank you, thank you. And, okay.
I just want to say we're at the starting point of it. So I'm hoping we can expand and look at this model because it is helpful to have both DYA involved, but I'll admit that right now we're very thankful to DYA. We're very thankful to DYA because they are staffing that, and I think we do need to provide more support. And so that's what the conversation we're having. How can we support them? Because I think if they could grow the capacity, but at this point they only have someone who's kind of supervising the facility, and they're not teachers or not. So we have to figure that part out.
Thank you, thank you. I have lots more questions, but I'll give my colleagues a chance.
Thank you. I know that we only have about 30 more minutes to testify, so I just want to give the other chair of the committee an opportunity to ask a question or two, and then I'll ask if there are teachers or parents that would like to come forward and testify. Thank you.
First off, I'm seeing a lot of probably these are all teachers, right, John? And I just want to thank each and every one of you for your service. And let me just say that I've touched base with the acting police chief and the majors and the captains. And my main interest here, when I was looking through the survey here, there's nothing in that survey that reveals that we ever had an active shooting. Some of the incidents that occurs in the schools can be tackled with, can be counteracted, right? But can I ask the question, John, what do you have planned if you do have an active shooter in the schools? What do you have planned? Because you know what, let me just say this, that some of the things that we talked about with the acting police chief and what to undertake, how to undertake the situation if we have weapons involved. I'm seeing on the survey that there's some weapons discovery at the schools, and I was wondering if we can do a metal detector in the front entrance of the school. Maybe that's one, right? Maybe we can remediate that. But active shooting is what I'm really worried about. And I don't think there's any plan right now what to do if an active shooter goes into the school and starts shooting our kids and starts shooting everybody in there. And the only thing that my approach to that is that to maybe get trained security officers, or trained police officers, retired police reservists, what do you call that? The reservists?
Right.
Not reservists, but there's another group of people that goes in there.
The Cape volunteers?
Yeah, and they do, law enforcement work. So, John, do we have an answer to that? Are we tackling that as one of my priority? Because let me just say this, I've been a cop for 18 years. And I'll tell you, we've never come up with a solution or some kind of plan to make sure that that protection is there at the school. If that type of incident will occur at the school, and by the time we call the police, a lot of people are gonna get hurt. So I want to be active on that, and I'm gonna do my very best to make sure that we have those securities trained, certified, and everything else, and equip them with something that they can defend the school kids and everybody else at the school.
So in response to that, I would say that, of course, we do have a response in terms of what we would do in the event of an active shooter. Of course, nothing is. The first goal would be to prevent it from happening in the first place. What you're talking about, when you talk about school security or other measures to prevent things from getting on campus, the reality of our school system is that a lot of our campuses are open campuses. Just the way these campuses are constructed, multiple ways to access the building. I think maybe Ukudu High School would be the best model of something that's kind of enclosed, where there's limited access in and out. So there's one, that's a function of our facilities, because we didn't build those facilities 30, 40, 50 years ago to prevent that access. We actually liked the wind coming in and so forth. The second issue with regard to law enforcement on campus, that's what we're talking about, as part of this work that we want to do with the executive and the legislature to figure out how to look at that, keeping law enforcement nearby or in the proximity, whether it's through security guards or we have our in-house officers, or it's through GPD. That's the plan we want to work out with the executive. So we appreciate that partnership. And then the final thing is, we do have active shooter training that our law enforcement providers partners do provide, and that and so our teachers and administrators and staff understand when there's an active shooter detected on campus, how to go and shelter in place, how to lock down, how to the communication protocols and so forth. Now, we've discussed is that even if that plan in place, it doesn't mean that we're going to prevent him from coming in and he or she from coming in and doing damage, but we have that immediate response in place to try to shelter in place and be protected. Law enforcement will come in and respond, and once they respond, they are in charge of that responsibility for detecting and pursuing and locating the perpetrator. So we appreciate them for, we did talk with them about that, about the fears about active shooter. They confirmed, they said, if there's we talked about Parkland, and there were some officers there who didn't go in, and we're kind of apprehensive about going in after the active shooter. Our police officers said they're going to go right in when they know that our kids are in danger, and we appreciate that service from all of our officers.
The thing is, we do have active police reservists, right, and we can employ those people because they're certified to carry weapons. But I want a public hearing and get the feeling of the community, get the feeling of the teachers to tell me if they agree to have those securities carry weapons. Because I want that line of defense right there when that thing happened. We're not going to wait to call the police department and all that we have something going on in there, because by the time they arrive. And also, we have several police officers that are retired, that are certified, that are trained. Maybe we can use this. And, some of my plans is to recruit expand the numbers of police reservists and work with the police department for those retirees and place them at the school. I don't want to say, I don't want to come out and say, hey, we got that plan already. As soon as that incident would happen, right? They're going to call up the police department and say, we got this active shooter going on. Because by then it's going to be too late. I want that line of defense right there. I'm going to do something about it, John.
Okay.
And
yes.
I talked with the chief of police, and I'm going to talk with all the chief of law enforcement to make sure that we do something like that, to have that line of defense right there at the school. Let's not just wait.
Yes.
Okay, because I don't know if any of you remember about the live shooting incident up at one of the medical centers.
SDA clinic. Yes.
Yeah, I was there.
This guy went into the medical center and started shooting everybody.
Yeah, we were there.
And it's surprising that that guy was caught later on. Like how many days?
He was actually killed. He was actually killed.
He was killed right away.
Right away.
Huh?
So.
He was killed once he was confronted.
He was, yes.
That was the first active.
So I don't want that thing to happen. I want,
yes.
Somebody there to protect our kids.
Senator, if I may, again, I'm Major Chargloff, and I'm not only the Investigations Bureau Chief, but I'm the Intel Commander for the Mariana Regional Fusion Center. And as like the superintendent, indicated, or that we've been working with them. I've been working with Chris Anderson, actually, and we've been doing active shooter trainings. We've even developed curriculums for both the elementary, middle, and high school. So the intent, again, is, you're right, when it does happen, but the intent is to prevent it. And that's the whole concept of the training, is so that as soon as whether they hear something, they see something unusual. But of course, the intent, and we appreciate it, and I hope we do get that support, but the whole concept of the active shooter, we say active shooter, but it's really an active event. I think we're going to need to somehow change this. But we've been working, like I said, with them, closely. So we're developing those. And we've also developed the active shooter type training or presentation. And this is for everyone, because we had different law enforcement folks, doing their own, different trainings. So through the previous HSA, he designated me as the coordinator. I've been working with like the schools, private sectors, even like the hotel industry. So is there a plan? Well, there's presentations, and these folks develop their plans based on it. And that's tied into the RAM that Mr. Anderson had spoken earlier. We've worked with them collaboratively to finalize that plan so that they can prevent it. So the core concept of what we do, and it's one of my core beliefs as a law enforcement officer, is the prevention aspect. But you're right. If God forbid, if we could get those additional resources, absolutely, because it's all about the prevention, and I agree. If that officer's there, or a uniformed person, even if it's a security guard, I'm sure that person's going to think twice. There's studies out there that have these active shooter folks that have committed. They said they were going to do it, but they saw a person in uniform. I now carry my firearm even when I'm on duty, every single day of the week. So those are the things that, yes, and I hope we do get those resources for the schools, and of course, even as was, us in the police department. But just, know that that's what we're doing at this point, because we want to make sure you're right. It's all about keeping the kids and the staff and faculty safe at the schools. Thank you.
Sir, if I can add on to that also, just for your reassurance, we've had the FBI come in and train a lot of our officers. So we have active shooter instructors that teach non-law enforcement. Then we have certified active shooter trained police officers. The academy that that's out on OJT, they went through a patrol rifle course. We have a yearly annual qualification for a patrol rifle. So there's a lot of officers out there with the equipment to address an active shooter. Okay, so and another thing, we've done a lot of community outreach, from neighborhood watch program, town hall meetings, school presentations, fade away from violence. So we're trying to be proactive. However, the numbers that we have right now out on patrol are numbers that can only be reactive. So just to be preemptive with any of you as school administrators about, why can't GPD put a police officer at a school? We can't. We don't have the numbers. Just to give you an idea, if 20 people in the island of Guam that has 170,000 people, if 20 people call the police, there is nobody out on patrol. Okay, just to give you that, insight on how short the manpower is in the Guam Police Department. However, we will prioritize calls. If they're down on a theft complaint and an emergency comes, we're going to drop that theft complaint. We'll tell that complainant we'll be right back. I will address that emergency and we'll come back. Okay. As much as possible, we would like to have officers patrol the schools at night. Okay. But like I said, if you read the news lately, there's been a lot of riots. There's been fatal accidents. Okay. When officers get called to those things, it's not just one officer. It's usually several officers, sometimes the whole shift. Okay. So like I said, when a serious emergency comes or 20 people call for the police, there's nobody out on patrol. Nobody patrolling. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd actually like to go ahead and yield my time for any members of the public that might want to talk.
Does anyone would like to give oral testimony?
Senator, can I just elaborate?
Just a minute, Mr. Anderson. Sure. Mr. Anderson. Anyone would like to give oral testimony?
Since nobody wants to talk, I can continue.
Hold on. They're nervous. Give them some time. Anyone? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I got it,
James Luan, the committee chair on health and safety for the schools. We talk about a lot of the programs and what we do in the schools, and the department is doing a lot. GPD is doing a lot with the short manpower that they have, and DYA, we're in collaboration with them to provide our students services. I'm a retired teacher. I retired 3 years ago. You asked about teachers, what they think. As a teacher, in the past, I've never gotten the chance as a teacher, or I've never seen a questionnaire regarding these issues. But because of the recent problems that come up in the social media, teachers are starting to say something. And we're starting to feel that effect in the schools. I believe now there are surveys that have gone around. One of the missing links that I believe that is missing from this equation is not in the school, but in the community itself. Something that I think we've denied for so long, maybe on a cultural basis. People fear the race card and things like that. I'm just glad that this body, there's some of you have taken that proactive approach to stand up and say that certain parts of our population have problems. The diplomat, Miss, I don't know what her name is, from the FSM, stood up and she stated in reality what the truths were about her own community. I've been advocating with students with the migrant students, that it's them that has to start that program to educate their citizens to conform with how things are done in Guam. Sort of like take the common ground that we all have being in this region and start working on that. I believe there has to be some social reform in our community. And I know as legislators, it's going to be tough. But somewhere along the line, we have to stand up. And I've been advocating this since I've been on the board, that we must come to the legislature to state that there must be some kind of social reform. I know I've asked Chris Anderson about the statistics once before. Nothing in black and white, but more of a conversation as to how many students really get in trouble every year. What percentage? And it seems that there's probably less than 3% of the population that get in trouble with different degrees of tier problems. But when it comes to the most offensive, being an out-of-control student, I think it's probably less than 1%. But that's the 1% that keeps hitting the media, that puts us in a quagmire that gets us noticed in the public. But the parents these days are starting to stand up, because all students are great until they become out of control, then we have to address the issue. You know? And it's those great students that are standing up now and saying, wait a minute, we seem to have all these supports to take care or reform these students that are out of control or have bad behavioral problems. What about us in the school? When are we going to get that support to be safe? So I've talked to judges, I've talked to some of you senators, recently, is that we need to reform. We have to have some kind of social reform in the family. I remember as a kid in the 70s, and in the late 60s, my grandmother would come out and says, you need to get in the house because public health is going to come. To me, that was the police department, because we'd be running in after 6 o'clock because public health is going to come. Keep yourself clean because public health is going to come. Somewhere along the line, there has to be some kind of social reform, because we're frustrating our system, mandating or creating laws to enforce things on problem kids. But we forgot about the family, the home base. I believe that, there are other countries that have social reform with the family. I think we need to recreate that, get back into our old laws and readjust them. Judges have said it. They state in the courts, we don't dictate, we just interpret the law. But the law needs to be changed. It needs to be modernized to conform to our society. Our adults create the problems. You see it in the paper every day. So what do our kids do? They follow, because these adults continue to get away with things. So there has to be a social reform in the family if we have to have education with those social reforms. And I'm not saying, send a social worker to monitor them. No. I'm saying if we have a kid that has a problem, most especially if we cite those problems as early as elementary or even in the middle school, somewhere along the line, there's a problem at the home. That problem has to be addressed in full force, not only by Department of Education, but also the social factors governing that student, whether it be public health or Department of Education. But somewhere along the line, we have to create some kind of program for social reform in the family. If that family has to go to class or has to be assisted, like other places in the United States, there are social reform programs that assist the families, in how to conduct their family, or whether they need assistance in getting a job, or how to deal with things the correct way. They need help in knowing how to do things, not just telling them, but knowing how to do things. That's where I think our money needs to be placed, because we continue to spend. We were here last couple of days ago about our budget being so large, but that's the mandates and the requirements of law that impel us to delineate that, and that's where we come from that. So if we're going to continue to reduce the Department of Education's budget, I think we need to start working on some of the other stuff, like social reform. The Department of Education cannot be the welfare for all. It's going to have to take the entire government process, and we're already starting it with DYA and the police department, but we also have to include. I think we have to create some laws on creating a social program for those 1%ers. or even the 3%ers, you know, and guide them as they grow until that family can conform with social laws in their society. That's the missing link. That's where I think we need to be at, because we're starting to mandate, we're starting to create a lot of social programs, but the kid comes and he does well. It's sort of like a test. They come in and they test excellent, but when they get into the real world of their society, does that test weigh on their result? I mean, you know, do they actually carry that on? Sometimes it's just left at the school. So how do we do that? You know, students with disabilities, they come to the school and they're giving this regimen, and this regimen is supposed to be expected to be followed at home, but is it really followed? That's where I think we need to really focus a lot of things. I think we're doing a good job, you know, as a department, working with our fellow government agencies to do as much as we can. But when the kid comes in and becomes belligerent and fights, where's the cause of that? I think we need to come to reality and start adding that to the equation, so that all the programs that we have in the schools would actually be effective, because we know that it's monitored and it's done at home. Thank you.
I see a lot of students here, and I just want to invite any of the students who want to speak, either the iBox representatives or any of you, to come up.
Before I continue, thank you, Senators and the Board of Education, DYA, GPD, for allowing this time to voice our concerns in regarding to school safety. And so this report that I'm about to make is derived from not only I myself and my counterpart from Southern High School, but the administration, the faculty and staff, counselors, student leaders, club and organizations, and most importantly, my counterparts in the Island Board of Governing Students. And so we're talking about school safety here, and the main purpose, or everyone's main goal or focus, is safety is first. And so what's been going on in the secondary level is we continue to face these challenges and these issues, and we as a district, we need to find a way to subdue these issues and find a way to focus ourselves in prioritizing what issues should come first and what issues should be addressed. And so with that being said, the issues that we're facing right now at the secondary level is coming from intoxication and smoking. And so the intoxication reports, majority of it at Southern High, come from the FSM community. But with that being said, we have yet to meet with the MSA, which is the Micronesian Student Association, and we are going to meet with them to find out what is it that is causing all of this to act out, especially in our school system. We're not necessarily there to bash on their race or ethnicity, but we want to find a way to come together and brainstorm and figure out what can we do as a district to accommodate their help and need for help in their smoking issues, drinking habits, whatsoever. And so with these intoxication reports, yes, we do have programs, and that is SAI, and that's the Substance Abuse Intervention. And we do have BTI, and that is Brief Tobacco Intervention. And so the concern with these programs is from the time the student is referred to the time the program is started, there's a huge gap of days and time in between for that student to commit the same offense. And so is there a way where, is there something that we can generate, perhaps maybe with DYA, to put in a program for that student for that duration of days and time, or have them basically be put under probation or check in with their administrator to assure that they are not under the influence, that they are not smoking, or they do not have any contraband on them whatsoever. And so with those programs being put in place, I think it's the only way to approach this correctly, to reassure that they get the help needed. And so with the smoking habits, though, the new thing now is e-cigarettes. And so that right now, the way that these e-cigarettes are designed are less conspicuous. It's easy to find, or it's easy to hide it. It can look like a lead pencil refiller. It can look like a USB. I can cover it in my hand. You will not know it. And so the only way to approach this is if we generate programs to educate not only our students, but our faculty and staff as well, whom are the first responders to these incidents. And some faculty and staff perhaps are not educated about it, they don't know about it, and so maybe sometimes they could mistaken it for just one of their personal belongings, or until the person displays that behavior of utilizing it, then that's when they'll know of it. But if we put these programs into place, it kind of minimizes the chances of that student being referred, because the teacher or the staff would have that knowledge of them knowing that, hey, this student has it, let's get control of it and let's address it. And so it's not a matter of them, yes, we want them to stop the habits, but it's the focus in the school district. It's about whoever's around them. And so getting rid of it out of the campus is what we should do. But stopping their habits is probably beyond our control. But it's the matter of keeping account of everybody around them. And so we basically should, and I really think that we identify these e-cigarettes and vaping modules as an explosive. It is something that has been proven. It explodes at any time given. We had one incident up there at Okadu High School, if I'm not mistaken. I think it blew up in the car, and it blew up in the face. And I think if we put this as an explosive under our ODRs for school, it gives the student, it's an eye-opener. It tells them, you know, hey, keep this at home, or let's not bring it to school because I'm going to endanger the students around me or faculty and staff. And so when we do that, it just subdues the problem. So we basically find ways to minimize these issues in our schools that we continuously face. And meeting with all these organizations, the focus was to have them come together and develop a plan of action to address these concurrent issues that keep on happening. And so our focus right now as a district should be subduing the issue, but our priority should be finding the root of the problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. One of the questions I have is with intoxication. What's sort of the procedure when students are found intoxicated? What they get referred, they get in trouble? Can anyone speak to?
Thanks for the question, Senator. Students who are found intoxicated at school, from a medical perspective, the nurses are required to take a look at that student and try to determine the level of toxicity. And of course, if the student is very toxic or is highly intoxicated, to contact 911 or get medical support for the student, right? From a disciplinary standpoint, intoxication is a level 3 offense. It's a serious offense and warrants a 10-day suspension from school. And obviously the most serious action a school can take for a student is to suspend them. Obviously we also contact GPD and get their support to address the criminal violation of the student being in possession or use of alcohol or any intoxicating substance.
There's a lot of talk about repeat offenders, and I can kind of see it in the numbers actually. Some of the numbers here, the number of students responsible for the number of incidences is lower, so that sounds like it's repeat.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, there is a table there that shows the total number of offenses and the students who are distinct. The difference being those students who are repeated offenders, yes.
That's the difference. Oh, okay,
Right.
that's the difference. So that number is distinct. That means those are all individual. Okay. Anyways, so with repeat offenders, are you seeing a lot of that? Is it the same kids getting intoxicated over and over again?
No, there are repeat offenders. And the superintendent alluded in his opening statements, the school-based behavioral health program. What we're trying to do, of course, is address the root issues as to why these students may be coming to school intoxicated or in possession or use of tobacco or any kind of illegal substance. And so the Department of Education has been running these substance abuse intervention groups, trying to get these students to come into these groups. Sometimes where school administrators are able to leverage the suspension days to try and provide that carrot for students to want to come in and take advantage of these programs. But nonetheless, the students who we find that are guilty of these kind of offenses, we are trying to provide them these therapeutic opportunities to try and address the issues as to why they're using alcohol or any kind of substance.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering. If there's also, do they get referred to social workers? There's talk about, issues in the home you were mentioning and the societal issues and how do we address that, right? So, and I know maybe there's not enough social workers. I met with some social workers who recommended having a social worker on site in the campus to sort of keep tabs, because I spoke to some social workers who said that they'll work with kids, they'll go to the homes, but then they don't know what's going on in the school system because they're not a part of that. And so some social workers recommended to me having social workers present in the schools. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
No, we do. DOE does have social workers and community program aides who operate for the department. They're not one in every school. They're actually spread across a few schools. I don't know what the exact ratio is right now. Maybe one social worker and CPA for maybe 3 or 4 schools, possibly. I mean, it's not my program, but I believe it was that when it was my program. But nonetheless, the schools are very good about engaging social workers to go out and try and bring family members into the school to try and address issues like that, or to go out and do home visits and try and find to get a better understanding of the home environment and some of those factors that may be contributing to why students are getting in trouble at school.
And maybe alcohol treatment programs. You mentioned something about substance abuse intervention, right?
Right.
But is there any way that they can be referred to, I don't know, behavioral health or something along those lines and get
Sure.
substance abuse treatment?
Well, the facilitators of these groups, they use what is called the ASAM. It's an assessment that they use to try and determine the level of or how serious the use of alcohol or substance is with the students. And of course, those students who are very high on that assessment, they can refer to Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness or maybe some more specialized programs that can maybe address them. I know that there is a substance abuse drug and alcohol program that is run by Sanctuary, I believe. And so that's an opportunity to take advantage of as well.
Senator, if I could just respond generally to the comment you made about being located at the schools. So I would just say that in general, I would be very supportive of school-based interventions, and that's why we've taken the lead in trying to figure out how to build internal capacity. But even if, as we do so, we're not going to be able to support at a level of one social worker per school or one psychologist per school, but the need is there, and the delivery of services is always better at the school because we do referrals. Sometimes we do hear that transportation becomes an issue. Sometimes the workload, the overload of referrals might be an issue for the agency. So we're just trying to figure out how to improve that. But we do know that when we deliver it at the school site, closer to the community, is more effective and easier for us to help ensure that it's effective.
Understood, and of course that's going to cost more if you have to hire a social worker for every school. Understood. Now another thing I'd like to recommend, and I know you've already sort of started this, engaging with the Micronesian Students Associations. I think that's a good start. I also think that touches on what you were talking about with working on the social and cultural level. I think that's a good way, is to engage with the Micronesian Students Associations, really get them engaged and try to get them to also work on self-policing their own communities. It might even just take, that might help a lot, I think. If you get them involved and get some of the key students who are involved in those organizations to talk to their peers and say, hey, knock it off, you're making us all look bad when you're doing this, and just sort of self-police in that sense.
I just want to, if I could recognize the administrators and the teachers who actually help support these groups. And one of the challenges we've had is not always, they want to form groups, they want to do positive things, but not always able to get an advisor or get the right guidance to be chartered to raise funds for their activities. So the reason we started doing this is just to provide a basic level of support to ensure that they could have the organizations at the schools. But we do know more and more of our administrators and can actually help us to find someone willing to volunteer their time, and that helps. That's helped us try to keep them sustained. So now we're trying to continue it. We tell them, please recruit juniors, have your juniors being prepared, just like we do with the iBox, so that next year you're not trying to figure out how to do this. You got juniors who can continue it, underclassmen, and then again, so it's kind of been slow but we're trying to sustain them at a basic level. But the question is, how can they contribute? And that's a great conversation to continue with them.
And also, are there gang problems with FAS or FSM Micronesian gangs in the schools?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, senators, for having us here today, because this is really important. Yes, just to let you know that I am the advisor for the Island Board of Governing Students. I'm more like their grandma, and we have met and we have discussed, because when I saw that they're meeting with the superintendent, I did question. And I said, can I have an iBox? So that the iBox can explain too, because they're really, by law, they're the representative for the students on the board. And as you heard Mr. Napoti, that some of them don't even know that they have that organization at their school. So they were tasked with the board to review 3 policies that is very serious right now and to come up with their recommendations. So I told them, I said, reach out to those groups. And some of them say they're mostly in promoting, or they wanted to participate in an event with their culture dance, their song and everything. And I think that's where maybe whoever at the school, because I understand that in order for them to have this organization, they should be chartered under the school's student club, right? But they are going to be reaching out to them, and because we need their support. And senators, you're all invited. Please mark in your calendar. It's March 23rd. The Island Board of Governing Students will have their 4th annual conference, and the theme is Unity Through Diversity. So we're going to be having a student panel from the former Island iBox that as far back as 2008 to share. And also, I just decided last night that I will also have the middle school panel, students in the middle school. We really have to work together, because I just want to let you know that when they come into school now with the bottle of drinks, Gatorade or whatever, they now they mix the Jello, spike it with the alcohol, and they bring it in. So they don't come in drunk. They become drunk during the school hours. Or in that Jello also, and GPD, please, they get marijuana. They cut it in strip, just like the tea, and they put it in that Jello. How I know? Because the students were telling me, and they were even trying to sell it during lunchtime. So that's the problem now. And the problem here is, and I hear Mr. Lujan.
Well, let me just say, marijuana was sold in schools when I was in high school too. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I know that. But I'm just telling you how it is now that they put
it's
it
not
into.
New.
Yeah, and this is in middle school. That we can have all this treatment for the kids, but I think the treatment has to be with the parents, because when they go home, or when they're at home, it's like the drink for the family, and that's where they see it. So it's really, we need to, not only on the student, but we need to educate the parents. We need to let the parents be accountable. And I know I talked to Senator Terlahi when he was telling me about weapons. I mean, being, the enforcement officers at the school. And he said, what would be the reaction of the parents? I know they're not going to support it, because when we were trying to put fence around the schools many years ago, they told, because I was on the board, they said, don't treat my child like a criminal or like an animal to put fence all around it. When we were introducing this metal detectors at school, the same thing. So I know it's, you know, we are going to face challenges, but the safety of our kids here, the safety of the kids that want to go to school and learn is very important. So we have a lot of work ahead, and I know Vice Speaker Nelson, let's continue this dialogue because there is a need, and we need to bring in all the stakeholders. And I told the superintendent, invite all this consulate from the outer island, from Korea, from China, to be on that table. We need the mayors here to be here because it's in their village. And you know, I hear about neighborhood patrol. I don't know how many mayors, how many villages have neighborhood patrol. That's important, right? Today we were at FB Leon Guerrero, and as we were touring, going around, I showed the governor and lieutenant governor. I said, you know that gate back there? That's what they called many years ago. It's for the outgaters. Because the kids jump out in the morning, then they jump back in to go and ride the bus. But it's a problem that everyone in the community have to work together. I feel for the administrators. I feel for the teachers. I feel for the employees. Because these kids come in with different discipline at home. And when they come to school, they think they can have the same way, act the same way that they do it at home. So I just want to thank all of you and GPD and DYA that let's continue this dialogue. We need to, this is not the end because I know that we're pressed for time, but that's why I wanted the student to be the one. And the Southern High School have come up with that plan. And I will make sure that I invite all of you on March 23rd. It will be at Ukudu from 8 to 3, and it will be extended out to the other partners so that they can be there to listen to what the students have to say. And that, you know, because it's very important that we work together. So thank you, senators. Thank you for accommodating us today. And I think it's a very successful dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gutierrez. We'll have to recess now, and we will continue this roundtable hearing in March. Some of the items that, you know, I hope that we can bring to the table to include myself that we can address is solutions, right? Because we talked about the challenges that we are having. And so some of the solutions that we are looking for is how do we address the illegal use of alcohol and the drugs that are coming into our schools, and also the tobacco use that the students brought up themselves. Some of the diversity and integration programs for our children, and also the alternative, the possibility of relooking at an alternative school that is perhaps a track, since they don't want to go back to their other schools, or if they're integrated back into their home school, that they cause the same challenges. And so perhaps we can look for an alternative school track to allow these students to have a consistent form of discipline for them, and that you put teachers in there with excellent classroom management and excellent teaching skills to help them grow and to be active members of our community when they move into adulthood. So yes, and if there's anything else that I may have missed, also what we can do for our families, right? Some of the, I know you shared, sir, on some of the social reforms and maybe look at laws and to hold, some of the schools that I toured, some of the administrators are a little bit concerned to hold the parents more accountable. The parents are very absent in these children's lives. It's difficult to get in touch with them. I myself, as a teacher, had that difficulty as well. And so perhaps we can look at some of the community engagement programs that we can move forward with. Okay? I'd like to thank GDOE, I'd like to thank GPD and DYA for being present today, and of course the students for having the courage and come out and voice your concerns. Keep on doing that. You know, you're going to be you are our future, so, and you're going to be sitting in our seat one day, and we want you to start developing in that aspect. I'd like to thank Senator Terlahi and Senator Shelton and Senator Rangel for staying for the duration. It is now 5:43, and this roundtable hearing is recessed. Have a good day.